Hey, student success, welcome to week 4 of the semester. So after this week, you will officially be halfway done with the summer session. So this week runs from June 28th through July 4th. And hopefully at this point, you're pretty comfortable. So I'm going to skip right to the lessons tab instead of going through the start here section. So in the lessons tab, I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to click into week 4, and you're going to see that in week 4, you are actually going over 3 chapters. Chapter 5, Chapter 7, and Chapter 8. So there are 3 chapters, and there's one assignment that aligns with each chapter. So you'll see there's a Chapter 8 assignment that's a discussion post, Chapter 5 assignment, and then this one goes along it actually ties in with all of the chapters because it deals with online learning. So you do have a discussion post this week. So as always, your post for attendance is due by Wednesday for week 4 attendance, and then responded to students by Sunday. And then all of the other assignments are due Sunday as well. I do want to point out right out from the get-go, Sunday closes on July 4th. And because we're an online class, that doesn't change anything. It's still due by Sunday. So if you're hoping to kind of celebrate this weekend, maybe just try to get a jump start and get everything done a little bit earlier in the week, since the Sunday is the holiday and technically the college is still open. So you want to make sure that you get these assignments done in time. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click in the materials folder, and you'll see that for most of our chapters, we also have PDFs to go along with them. So I'm going to start with Chapter 5 first, and I'm going to go over the Chapter 5 slides. So Chapter 5 is talking about reading to learn. So the big points here is that college reading is different from high school reading. The College Reading Learning Association did a study just a few years ago and said about 85% of what you learn in college is done through reading. That's a huge chunk of information to be taken in through that modality. That's because so often you have to read outside of class to be prepared for class or to prepare for assessments. So because of that, reading is so important at the collegiate level, and you have to take personal responsibility for what you read. So sometimes you'll have a class where you have to read a chapter, and they may talk about some things in class, but not everything, but the instructor still expects you to have read and understood it all because it still might pop up on the test. So a general rule of thumb is to expect to spend about 2 or more hours on homework, basically reading, for most classes, for every hour you spend in class. Now, is that like a hard and fast rule? No, because there are some classes where you're not going to need that much time, and there are other classes where you're going to need more than that. So that's why it's about the average. And reading is a cycle, and it's not just one of these like one shot and done, and we're going to kind of talk about that. So there are steps in the active reading process. I don't know if you've ever found yourself, and I can say I'm guilty of this as well. If you've ever found yourself reading and all of a sudden you're to page 20 and you're like, oh my gosh, I zoned out. I have no idea what I read the last 20 pages, but I can check it off my to-do list at least. That might be because you're a passive reader in some cases. So you want to be a more active reader, which means you want to take part in the active reading process. So I'm going to equate reading to writing because they're so closely interconnected. So when you write something, you don't expect to write it the first time and it be golden and you turn it in, because we know that writing is a process. You have to write, rewrite, read it, draft again, revise. So we know this. The same thing goes along with reading. Reading is a process. You can't always read something the first time through and it be like, I got it, 100%, I understand it. Because there are times where you have to go back and reread or fill in your notes or ask questions. And so part of that means engaging in that process and being active. So how can you do that? Well, these are like the 4 steps of the process. So first, preparing to read, which means you have stuff to do before you even read. Make sure you set a purpose. Your instructor may set the purpose for you. They say, hey, you have a test on Friday. You're reading chapter 1 to prepare for the test. Well, that's your purpose, to understand for the test. Other times they may not set a purpose for you, so you don't know what the purpose is. So you have to set your own purpose. Like by the end of this chapter, I'm going to understand 10 vocabulary words, or I'm going to summarize in my own words. So set your own purpose, which can allow you to have, some motivation to get through. You also want to kind of preview the chapter or preview the article or whatever it might be. What's the title? What are the sections? Are there graphics? Are there visuals? Are there any kind of bold or italicized or underlined words? That alone is allowing yourself to see how it's set up and form connections with what you already know about the topic to what you're about to read, and it makes it a little easier for you to take in that information. So this kind of goes over that again. Look over the certain sections. Why are certain things maybe highlighted, or how does this connect to your course material, or what is the instructor wanting you to get out of the assignment? All of these things are preparing you to read. I always tell my students that, as an athlete or someone who's going to take part in a physical exercise, you warm up. You have to do that with your mind as well. You warm up your mind, and that's what this step does. It prepares you to read. It gets your mind ready to take in the information. All right, so the next part of the process is actually reading. So take a look at your headings again, and those can be good kind of questions to pose. Look at your headings and turn those into questions that can give you a direction while you read, and connect what you know to what you already know about the subject. Or maybe if you don't know anything, maybe go and do a quick Google search and just get some quick background information. And that kind of get you in the right mindset as well. And then chunk it up. Excuse me. So chunk up the reading. Don't try to read, if it's like a 20-page chapter, don't try to read all 20 pages in one setting. Do 5 pages. And that way, when you get to page 5, if you're lost, you only have to go back and reread 5 pages versus waiting until the very end to realize that you're lost. So chunk up those sections and attack them that way. And then try to understand. If you don't understand, fix it right away. Don't let it go. Okay, so while you're reading, here are also things to be doing. So look for answers to 20 questions, meaning, did you write down some questions at the beginning? Did the textbook have questions for you? Look for those answers to those questions. Look at the first and last lines of each paragraph. Why are certain things, bold-faced or put in diagrams? And then the big thing is, again, look for the answers. Can you answer those questions? Did you see anything in your notes that needs to be readdressed? Do you know the keywords in the section? So all of those things you should be doing while you are in this reading process. Okay, that's what you're thinking of. Now you'll see that it says don't highlight or take notes while you read. The reason for that is because if you've ever highlighted or underlined anything and you get to the end of the section and you look and you're like, well, crap, I have underlined 90% of the page. It's because while we read, we think everything's important. And so you want to read a section and then go back and take notes or highlight, because then you have some perspective on what was actually important. So here are some other ways to make sure you're getting the main ideas or the big ideas. Write questions in the margins or write down your own answers to those questions in the margins, define keywords, and make sure that you're really looking over your notes. And then finally, after you have prepared to read, you've done the reading, you've taken some notes or highlighted, then you want to review, because it makes no sense to write any notes or to read something if you're not going to at least go back and review it. So look at your notes, fill in any gaps. How do those ideas connect to what's going on in class? Maybe talk to other people about the reading assignment. Test yourself, quiz yourself, and then review frequently. Because the more frequently you review, the more likely you are getting that information to your long-term memory, and then practice retrieving it by practice quizzes or reviewing more often. Okay, so that's the reading process. So there's also a link to the chapter 5 in here. And again, chapter 5. It'll go over all of this. It's going to give you those regular self-assessments, but then also talking about how is reading at the college level different maybe than what you're used to in high school reading. How do you read to learn? Obviously we spend the first few years learning to read in our education, but now we're at a point where we are reading to learn. So this goes into more detail about that reading process that I just walked you through. So it goes into some examples of things that you can preview and how you can go about that process, and talking about really making sure that you are prepared to read, and then what you do while you read, how you capture those main ideas, again, what we just got done talking about, and then the importance of making sure that you review. And then these are just really some general strategies for textbook reading. Again, we talked about this, chunk up the work, set time aside to actually read. This is why you preview and say, okay, this is 20 pages but it's on something I know a lot about, so maybe it won't take me too long. Or this is 5 pages, but I know nothing about this, so I need to carve out an hour. So like schedule your reading and know how much time you're going to give to it. Make sure you're in the right physical and mental space, making sure you're avoiding distractions. So these are just kind of general good reading tips. This section I will not talk a whole lot about, but I'm going to point out that this is helpful if you're reading a special kind of text, because you should approach different texts differently. For example, a math text. If you are looking at different books that are a foreign language, if you're looking at something that has a lot of graphics and visuals. So this section really goes into kind of how to attack those type of textbooks to make sure that you're getting the most out of them. And then this next section here, the last section, talks about building your vocabulary. It is really important to have a large vocabulary, because obviously the more words you know, the less you'll have to stop and look them up and aid your comprehension. Now, if you don't have a large vocabulary, that's okay. You need to have strategies to overcome and strategies to look up words. And so this is going to talk about, look out for those new words. If you see a new word, look for context. Look to see how it's being used. See if the author has given you a clue on the meaning of that word. Look to see if you need to look it up in a dictionary. Say it out loud, read it out loud. Sometimes, actually, a lot of research will support reading out loud in general to help with comprehension, but reading a word out loud that you don't know can help you. And then build it into like a flashcard or a word journal. I have recommended in the past to students, once they get in their majors, to start a vocabulary journal that really is going to help build their vocabulary for their specific field, which can really be nice. All right, so that is chapter 5. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look. The next one is chapter 7. So I'm going to pull up the chapter 7 slides. So chapter 7 is talking about interacting with instructors and just classmates in general. So why is this important? Well, you want to be able to interact with your instructors and other classmates, because oftentimes when you get into your college-related courses, your instructors are working actively in the field. Maybe they're teaching at night and they're working during the day, or they have their foot in the door, on the weekends, or whatever the case might be. And so you need that they're a great resource, but they're also going to expect you to learn and be responsible for your own learning. So how do you do that? Well, first you want to actually make sure you attend class, even if attendance isn't required, which you don't see very often anymore. You might miss something that's talked about that you can't necessarily get from the reading or the syllabus. So you want to be in class, unless obviously a major issue. If you are missing, you want to make sure that hey, communicate. This is why I'm not there. What can I do? But you're in class because it shows your instructor that you care. It's making sure that you're getting all the material, and you're paying to be there. So unless, you or a family member is sick, or there's an emergency situation, you're essentially paying to be in class, but also do something else. So you want to make sure that you schedule appointments or things like that around your class schedule if possible. So there is a correlation between how many classes you miss and lower grades, which I think makes sense. But you want to be in class. You want to be there getting the information. So what happens if you can't be in class? Check your syllabus is the first thing. Your syllabus is your outline. Make sure you know what's happening. Communicate with your instructor, email or call to make sure that they know, and if there's anything you can do before or after to make up any assignments. Maybe ask another student to kind of fill you in a little bit, or maybe go to the instructor's office hours. So again, this might all sound like common sense, but it's surprising sometimes a lot of students who don't know these things, or they won't do these things. So just a nice kind of reminder. Also, it's important to participate in class. So participating isn't just the day of class, it's all the things you do ahead of time. It's reading your syllabus, it's reading the assigned chapters, it's taking notes, it's coming to class prepared. It's sitting in the front of the room to let the instructor know that you care, and you can make eye contact and you can be engaged. You're taking notes in whatever format is most comfortable for you. You ask questions. If you're not comfortable quite yet asking questions in class, maybe you send an email or you stay after class, and you engage, and you really try to be present, not just your body, but your mind as well. So asking questions is another thing. Some students are really shy about this. They don't necessarily like asking questions, which for the first couple of weeks, it's usually understandable. Maybe you stay after or send it by email, but it really does show your engagement. And often students who have a question, there's more than one of you in the class that has the question. And so if you ask the question, odds are, 10 other people or whatever might have that same exact question. So you're helping more than that person. It's also important to answer questions because, again, that shows that engagement, and answering and asking questions is great for listening. It's great for note taking. It's great for comprehension in general. Okay, so communicating with instructors, you want to make sure that you introduce yourself the first time you see your instructor. Some instructors teach literally hundreds of students, both combination of online and face-to-face. So the first time you go in, don't assume they automatically remember what class you're in, and introduce yourself. And that's the same for email. Don't assume when you email, they see your name and they know what class you're in. I am so-and-so in student success online. Just introduce yourself. Make sure that you are being professional. Use really good communication skills. In an online class like ours, I don't know all of you face to face. So the only way I know you is from how you talk to me in written communication. And so you want to make sure that you're presenting yourself in a professional way. Same like you would do if you are submitting a resume or an email to a potential employer. So just make sure that you are doing so professionally. There is a lot of issues with anxiety. So this kind of talks a little bit about like that presentation aspect, making sure that when you are speaking in a formal presentation, or even if it's informal in a classroom, know that what you're going to say, know your purpose, understand your audience, practice and prepare. That's the biggest thing. Preparing is going to help you with that anxiety. And again, it goes up here, plan, prepare, practice. That's a big piece of any kind of presentation type that's going to happen in any class. You want to prepare. All right, so chapter 7, link to the textbook. This is going to go over everything we kind of just talked about. So again, those regular self-assessments and seeing how you already do with this particular concept. So it's going to talk about, again, the importance of attending class, and it's going to give you like a little bit of a scenario here and how attitude can play a really big difference in your class attendance and the way that you approach attending class. This next section is going to talk again about participating in class and how important it is, and some kind of guidelines that we just got done talking about, particularly as it relates to large lecture halls or even online classes, and how sometimes you have to adapt to different teaching styles. Just like every student has their own preference, every teachers have different preferences on how they teach. So sometimes you have to adapt a little bit. And so this will talk about how you can do that and the importance of doing so. And then this goes about that communication, the importance of professionally and successfully communicating with instructors. And then this very last section goes over those public speaking components, guidelines for preparing and how to reduce that anxiety. And it goes into a lot of depth. So if you know you have a presentation coming up this semester or maybe in the fall, this would be a good one to really pay a lot of attention to. All right, so that is chapter 7. All right, and then finally, chapter 8, we don't have a PowerPoint, but I'm just going to open up the chapter 8 link. So chapter 8 is about the writing process. So again, it's going to ask you to kind of self-assess where you are with your writing abilities and where do you want to go with those. Now, what's the difference between like high school and college writing? Some students are really shocked when they get to their first semester of college and find out they have to write like a 5-page research paper right off the bat. And eventually you'll be writing a little bit more than that even. So you want to know there's a lot of certain expectations with the writing process. And so academic writing is going to require a lot of different types of sources, types of writing, lengths, requirements, citations, all of that. So this section really does go between high school and college. So if you are a current high school student or you just left high school, I would really recommend kind of focusing in on this section so you know the expectations between high school and college in terms of writing. What kind of papers are commonly assigned in college classes? So this is going to talk about kind of these key Bloom's taxonomy verbs, papers that are going to ask you to summarize, papers that are going to ask you to analyze. So what does that mean? And it's going to ask you to kind of answer kind of questions there. So this is also going to talk to you about different paper expectations and questions that you might pose to yourself whenever you are writing these papers. How can you become a better writer? So this is going to talk to you about instructor expectations. What do instructors want? I would always recommend that you ask questions, that you ask for rubrics if they're not provided, ask for guidelines, and use resources. And I'm going to talk to you about our Writing Center here in just a few minutes. But this is going to give you some more details, again, about having tips on how to become a better writer. Other kinds of writing you might have, and this is very common, group essays. You might have to write a paper with a group. You may have to write a paper in class. You may have to write papers in online classes. So what do each of those things look like? So that whole chapter goes into depth about the different types of writing and expectations. But again, I wanted to point out on the Stark State homepage under info for current students, here you'll see we do have a writing center. So if you pull that down, it's going to tell you the hours, as well as we have an online writing center. So here's our online writing center. You can sign up, and this is where you can make your appointments online. If you are hoping to, not have to come to campus, you can make an hour-long appointment with a writing tutor online, and you can send them your paper, and they will talk with you back and forth, usually just through chat, which is why it's an hour-long appointment, to give you some tips on how to navigate that paper. Now, if not, they do have on-campus locations that you can make appointments. And I'll show you real quickly, if you are in My Stark State and you go to, of course it's going to take a minute to log in, if you go under academic support, you're going to see a link to the Writing Center right here as well. And this is going to direct you to a page. If you don't necessarily want to make an appointment, there are different resources here. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to make an appointment, but I do want to know more about thesis statements. So here's, a resource on thesis statements. When you do make an appointment to the Writing Center, make sure you take the instructor's assignments for the writing, as well as planned questions, so that you can get the most out of your appointment. Odds are at some point in your time at the college, you will be required to go to the Writing Center, or the Writing Center will come to your class. So you'll get to know a little bit more about them. But I at least wanted to show you where they're located in terms of their resources in case you wanted to start making appointments this summer, or you wanted to at least access their online resources. Okay, that is the lecture for chapters 5, 7, and 8. I'm going to scroll down now to the assignments. So for the assignments, as I mentioned, you do have a discussion forum, so that is due Wednesday for week 4 attendance. Chapter 8, and this will look familiar because you've had posts just like this. So it says, here you have a list of 4 topics. You need to answer all 4. So you're going to answer all 4 and make sure that you respond to both statements. So think about writing. This is specific to writing. So think about your past writing, sentence level mechanics, writing process, and seeking help, and answer each statement in each of these 4 topics. And it goes over, it gives an example of how to do that. Remember to post, you click in here, you create thread, and it will repeat the prompt right there. So make sure you respond to all 4 topics, both statements inside each topic. Respond to your original post by Wednesday for week 4 attendance, and respond to 2 classmates by Sunday. Remember, your responses to classmates should be thoughtful, not just yes, no, or I agree. Make sure that they're a good sentence or 2. So that's your discussion forum, and that relates to chapter 8. Next is your chapter 5 assignment. This will look similar to your chapter 4 assignment, I believe. So you'll pull this up. It's a Microsoft Word document. It's going to open up right here. So hopefully, again, this looks familiar because you have areas to improve on. So reading comprehension, reading speed, and vocabulary. What 2 things will you do in each of those areas as they relate to reading to improve? When will you take those actions, and how will you know? So what are you going to do to improve your reading comprehension? So 2 things. When are you going to do those things, and how will you know your reading comprehension has improved? Same thing for reading speed. What are you going to do to increase or maybe even decrease your reading speed if you think you read too quickly? When are you going to do it? How will you know you've improved? And then what 2 things can you do to improve or build vocabulary? When are you going to do it, and how do you know? So that's your chapter 5. And again, if you need more information, always go back to your materials folder, bring up that chapter 5 PowerPoint, or click in the chapter 5 textbook. That is due Sunday, and you'll just click in there and upload it as an attachment. All right, and then your last thing is this right here is online learning right for you. It's actually 2 parts. It's a survey and then a response. So right here it says take this short survey, and you can see I can click on it. So you're going to go to this page right here, and you're going to take this survey. It's going to ask you a series of questions. You're just going to answer and then hit submit. It's going to give you a score. I will not see your score. So you have to go back in here, and it says after you take the survey, submit your score under Write Submission and comment whether you believe online learning is right for you and why. So right here, you'll click in, and right here under Write Submission, I scored a whatever, and I agree because. Or I scored a blank and I disagree because. So tell me what you scored and if you agree or disagree with that particular scoring as it relates to your online learning score. All right, that is also due Sunday. So a quick recap, make sure you please look over any other additional information in chapters 5, 7, and 8. Post your original response in the Chapter 8 discussion forum by Wednesday for week 4 attendance. Respond to 2 classmates by Sunday. Submit your Chapter 5 assignment and your online learning right for you survey and response by Sunday as well. If you have any questions, please let me know. Have a great week and a safe 4th of July weekend.